Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing the Tonal. So the Tonal is an extremely low profile cable machine, believe it or not. And I'm just gonna talk about what's inside of this thing, some good things, some bad things, some things that I enjoy, some things that I don't enjoy, and just some tips if you are thinking about purchasing one of these for your home and even for your gym. So first, let's talk about what this thing costs. So get ready, this thing is about $3,500. But when we compare this to other typical cable machines that we would purchase, like a free motion machine or something similar, we're talking about $4,000 to $5,000 for a big clunky cable machine. And now that a lot of people are moving to wanting to be able to do fitness in their homes, or they have smaller gyms and micro gyms, I think that this could be a great option for that price point. And for $3,500, you're getting the system itself, and then you're getting some attachments and accessories. So in terms of attachments, you're gonna get the rope attachment, let's call it the barbell attachment, and then you're gonna get what they call smart handles, and we'll talk about why they're so smart here in a minute. And you're also getting a foam roller, a yoga mat, as well as a pretty stable bench. So for the price, I don't think it's that bad, but I think that's what people are gonna look at first. They're gonna say, hey, it's this home workout system, and they compare it to like the Peloton or an assault bike or a rower, and they're like, this is 3, 4x what I would pay for those pieces. Don't think about it like that. Think about, I'm buying a cable machine, and then we'll talk about if this is a good cable machine for you or not. So when purchasing the Tonal, it was really clear that they are a very young startup. And the reason why that was clear is because customer service wasn't awesome. So I purchased this thing back in November of 2020, and I didn't hear anything. December came around, mid-December, and then I really started to think, do I want to continue with the purchase? And eventually we figured it out, and the Tonal finally arrived at my house in January 2021. So the experience in purchasing wasn't the best, but the experience in delivery and installation was actually awesome. So the way that it works is Tonal uses a white glove service. This thing is like 300 pounds, even though it doesn't look like it. So there are professional installers that have to come out to your house to put this thing up. And something that's also important to think about on top of the $3,500 that you're paying for this thing is that you're locked into a year subscription service with them at $49.99. And we'll talk about what's included in that subscription service. And if you're like me, you're not even really going to use it, but it's just kind of the price that you're going to pay to use the system. And it just has like workouts in there. It has exercise libraries. It has some pretty cool features for, let's just call it like newbies or someone that doesn't have a coach and doesn't have a lot of direction. So I think it is an awesome add-on. But if you're like me, you're probably not going to use it. So you're just going to be essentially throwing away $50 a month. All right, so now let's talk about how the Tonal actually works. So it's really interesting in how they get the load and how you get resistance out of a machine that's just sitting on your wall. So the way that they do that is through electromagnetic tension. So there's not like plates in here that are moving up and down when you're moving this pulley. It's actually using magnets. And it's very similar if you guys have ever heard of or used a Kaiser machine. It's a similar feel to that. So if you go into your local gym and you use a normal pulley system that has a bunch of plate stacks, you'll notice when you tug really hard, you'll feel like a little bit of, the weight's floating because you pulled really hard. You don't get that with this. So with the eccentric or going down or the concentric or going up, you actually have the same amount of tension on either side, which is really cool and really interesting, and it leads to a much smoother experience. In terms of how the system works and how you get it set up, so essentially what's going to happen out of the box is you're going to set up a user profile, and you can have multiple user profiles, and those are included in your subscription service. So if you live in a house with 2 or 3 people, each one of those people will have their own profile. They'll have their own iOS or Google Play app that's attached to their profile. And the system essentially learns. It learns how strong you are, how weak you are, how often you train, what kind of training you do. And it actually has some pretty interesting recommendations, not only in types of exercises or programs that you should do, but also has some pretty interesting recommendations of the amount of load that you can do. And something that I really like about this thing is that while you're training, let's say you're doing a set of cable goblet squats and you have 4 sets, it's actually going to make recommendations after sets 1 and 2 based on the power output, based on tension, based on tempo, based on range of motion. So there's some pretty cool learning that happens inside of the machine. So if you're using this thing on a day-to-day basis, and this is like your main thing that you're using for resistance training, there's a couple different options for you. So option number one is that you can search their library. There's a bunch of strength programs. There's a bunch of yoga programs, meditation programs, the whole nine. I haven't really messed with that too much. I mostly just use this for custom moves or custom exercises to fit inside of my own training program, because I wanted to get a really good feel of how durable is this thing, how is the resistance, and is 100 pounds per arm enough? And we'll get into that in the next section. But just to give you an idea of how you would use this on a day-to-day basis, you could follow one of the programs, which I wouldn't recommend, or you can just use it inside of your own training program. And the learning curve is actually not that steep on this. So when you come in, what they ask you to do is to do a strength test. And that strength test has different patterns of movement, and they're just trying to gauge how strong are you in each pattern of movement. And based on how strong you are in each pattern of movement, that's where those loading recommendations come from. If you're like, okay, I want to do a cable RDL, they're going to say choose your own weight or use recommended weights. And even if you do choose a recommended weight, you can change that thing up and down as you're going through that set or through those sets inside of your program. So the learning curve isn't that high. And something else that I like about it for newbies, let's call it, is that when you step up to this thing, you actually have an exercise library that's going to walk you through how to do every single movement. And it's also going to tell you exactly where these cable arms need to be. So let's say you did choose that let's call it the cable RDL with the flat bar. It would tell you that it needs to be on setting 1 and it needs to be pushed out to setting 2. And you just match both of them on each side, and then it gives you a thumbs up once you're in the right position. You attack your bar, and then you get after it. In terms of how the arms actually work, so you'll notice that you have a couple different buttons here. So you have a button on the side that you press, and that goes in or out. You have this button right above that you pull, that pushes the arm down or pulls it up. And then you also have this slider here where you pull it out, and then you can go low or you can go high. So in terms of usability, it's actually a pretty clean piece of equipment. The only thing that I don't like about it is that it feels a little bit cheap. So there's a lot of plastic that's used, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I haven't seen any issues with durability. Maybe it's a good thing because it's lighter to manipulate and move, but there is a lot of plastic and there's a decent amount of aluminum too. So only time will tell if it holds up, but all in all, I think the arms are pretty solid. All right, now let's talk about training with the tonal, the most important part. So I've been using this thing for a couple of months for, let's call it 80% of my cable exercises. And the interesting thing is that I'm using a free motion when I go to the gym, and then when I'm training at home, I'm using the tonal. And I'm in a program where I've done a couple programs where they've been pretty linear in nature. So I'm like going 1 week to another. 1 week I'm using the tonal, the other week I'm using the free motion machine, and some pretty cool insights from that. Number one, like I said in the previous piece, is that tension seems to be a lot higher on this thing. So it keeps you honest. You know, when you get to the top of let's call it a bicep curl, and you go a little bit fast from here to here, and you lose that tension and it almost catches you off guard a little bit and you have to over control it on the way down. You don't have that here. So it's almost like that tension is always in the handle or always on the bar or on the rope every time you extend and flex. So tension is a lot higher or significantly higher on the tonal versus a free motion or typical cable machine. And it's just an enjoyable machine to use. It gives you a lot of feedback on the screen. So a couple things that I enjoy, especially when you're doing like higher time under tension moves, is it gives you your time under tension for that entire set. It also gives you how many reps you've done. So if you have let's say you're doing those bicep curls and it's at like a 5-second eccentric and you're doing 15 reps, you're counting that 5-second eccentric and you're trying to count to 15. A lot of us get lost. So you just peek up at the screen and it tells you exactly how many reps you have. And you can preset this thing to those 15 reps, so it'll give you a countdown. So it'll beep on 13, beep on 14, and give you kind of a stop noise on 15. So if you're kind of grinding through those bicep curls, the Tonal has that audible feedback, and it'll tell you to stop, that you're done. And another few pieces that I really enjoy is it tells you your power output. So this could be really beneficial for a client or you training at home, and you're saying like, let's go as many reps as possible in the goblet squat, right, at 50 pounds. And it's like, what is an AMRAP truly, right? Like, people don't do AMRAPs until their legs fall off and they can't move anymore. They do it until they say, I think that was enough. I think I probably have 1 or 2 in the tank, and it's so subjective. Here we can actually prescribe. I want you to do AMRAP goblet squats until you go below 80% max power relative to your first rep. And it's like, whoa, what? But you look at the screen and the Tonal actually tells you that. And that's just one example of how you can use power output inside of prescriptions for clients or for yourself to really understand, am I intentionally attacking this movement in a way that I'm not losing power from reps 10 to 15. So I like that it has that power output feedback. Another thing that I really like is they call it range of motion, but I like to use this for tempo. So you can kind of see this curved line that goes up and down. And if you have a symmetrical curved line from rep to rep to rep to rep, you know that you're nailing your tempo. But when you start to see, let's call it a flat line, and then an increase, and then a decrease, and then no flat line, you know that you're having inconsistent tempos. So I really like that as direct feedback as you're going rep to rep, because you know that your range of motion is the same and your tempo is the same per rep. And it's a really cool experience when you do 15 reps of something and you see this nice symmetrical line going up and down. And then if you don't see that, you know, like, okay, maybe I stumbled on that RDL, that single leg RDL at rep 8, and that's why I flatlined a little bit, because I had to reposition myself. So that's a really clean experience, and I think that's an awesome feature that they added. And it's just another piece to give you at home feedback of what you're doing correctly or not. Also, on that same note, they also have 17 sensors in this thing that are always looking at you. To some people, that could be a little bit creepy, but if we're looking at, getting feedback, and if you're not comfortable with a particular movement, maybe don't do it. But if the Tonal tells you to do it, it's going to give you some feedback. So if you're doing that single leg RDL and it notices that you're not reaching full range of motion, or you're twisting at the hips, this thing's actually going to tell you, hey, try to get a little bit lower in the RDL, because it's thinking about what you did rep 1. Or if it does see that flat line and it sees that you kind of fell off kilter a little bit, it's going to remind you to regain balance in that lead foot. So I think that's a really cool feature that they have in there. And I think there's a lot of potential to add a lot of cool things in the future with this thing. Now talking about the handles and the attachments themselves. So I mentioned the smart handle before, and what that is, it's a little button that's super easy to use. So I put my hand around this thing. Let's say I'm doing those bicep curls. This is probably not the best exercise to demonstrate for this, but let's say I'm doing bicep curls and I get to the middle and I'm like, oh, this thing is too heavy, I'm going to fail. I can actually press this button and then it deloads all the load back down to 0. So that's a pretty cool feature to have. And it's also in the barbell. So if you're front squatting and you get to the bottom and you're like, no way I'm getting this load up, you can press that button. It's going to deload all of that weight. Then you can stand up comfortably. The rope isn't a smart attachment, but you can't really think of any exercises that you would use with a rope that you can't just let that thing go and be okay. So you don't need spotting assistance or anything like that there. Some other cool things that I really like about the Tonal are that you can actually kind of get creative in the way that you're prescribing exercises. For instance, if I want to increase tension in eccentrics only, I can set that on the Tonal. So let's say I'm doing that front squat and I really want to focus on overloading the exercise in eccentrics or the way down. I can set it to 20% more weight in eccentrics. I'm going down, it's tough, it's tough, it's tough. You can push a lot more load, or you can lift a lot more load in eccentrics than you can in concentrics. That's where we fail, usually, is when we try to transition from the bottom to the top. But the Tonal knows when you get to the bottom of that front squat, and then it's going to deload 20%, and then you can come up with really great intent and power, and then it understands when you're going back into that next eccentric and it's going to add load. So that's a really cool mode that you can utilize here to increase eccentrics. Another cool mode is chain mode. So if you think about if you do bench press with chains on either side of the barbell, you can kind of think about what's happening with those chains and the point of them. So the point is to increase the strength curve at the top of the movement. So as those chains get off the ground, they get heavier because they're not resting on the ground. So there is a chain mode here. So if I wanted to lay down and I wanted to do a bench press, it would actually increase in load as I get further away from my chest. So just another training method that you can utilize on this cable machine that you just can't utilize on something like a free motion or your other typical full body trainers that you would see in commercial gyms or even a lot of micro gyms these days. So those are a couple cool features that I really enjoy. Looking at load, because that's a question that I've gotten a few times. It's like, can I really load this thing up enough to give me the dose response that I'm looking for? And the answer is maybe. So what they say is that each arm has 100 pounds of tension max per side. That is total BS because I've put this thing all the way up to 100 and it's at least 1.5 times that. Because I can definitely deadlift over 200 pounds, and when I put this thing up to 100%, the tension is different. Remember, it's magnets. It's not like real steel weight or rubber weight. So it is different, so it's a different feel, but it's definitely not 200 pounds. It's probably closer to 350 or 400 pounds. So I don't think a lot of people are going to have issues with load, especially because it's a cable machine, right? Like if I wanted to go and back squat heavy, I'm gonna go to my rack and put a bunch of weight and back squat really heavy. And I understand that some people may be considering getting this thing as their only method of fitness, of resistance training, and that's okay. And usually those people that only wanna use the tonal for resistance training, 100 pounds per side is plenty, because usually those aren't the people that are back squatting 500 pounds if they just want to use this for resistance training. So load, I don't even think it's a factor. And because this thing is built on software, I wouldn't be surprised if in 6 months they were like, software update, we're gonna add 50 pounds of load per side. I wouldn't be surprised if they had the capability to do that, because it is a piece of technology. All right, final thoughts on the tonal. So I know you guys are watching this and you're like, does he recommend it or not? I don't know, right? Like, I really like it. If I had to make this decision again back in November, I'd buy it again for sure, because COVID hit and I went on Amazon, I went on Google Shopping, I went on everything to try to figure out what is a really solid cable solution that I can have in my garage. And there's nothing, right? Like, there's pulley systems that you can buy where you add a bunch of like bumper plates or iron plates and you pull the thing. Like, it looks a bit archaic to me. And I didn't want to use that stuff, but I came across this thing. I did a good amount of research before I hit that purchase button, and I'm happy with the purchase. The biggest unknown right now for me is durability. So it's like, how is this thing going to stand up? They have a decent warranty, so if this thing falls apart tomorrow, I feel pretty good. But once that warranty is up, I'd be pretty upset if I spent $3,500 and then I'm just left with this big, sexy mirror thing on my wall and there's no usability in it. Because if this thing is durable, I would tell gym owners to purchase it, because now we start looking at real estate, right? And where real estate is right now and how much leases cost. And that goes into gym owners' brains when they think about how much space do they need. Things like this would be an awesome solution because it's so space saving for me at home and for a gym owner in their micro gym. So if someone thinks like, I need this huge pulley system, right? They're automatically adding 500 square feet to their facility. If we could have 3 pulley systems on the wall that are very low profile, and when they're not being used, they just look like a black mirror on the wall, and it's durable, this is the solution in my opinion. I would, if I owned a gym right now, I would probably have this in it instead of a cable machine. Hopefully I wouldn't be eating my words if it fell apart 2 months later, but we're not doing a bunch of crazy dynamic activity on this thing, right? It's slow, it's controlled. I haven't seen anything where, you know, outside of the few plastic parts and the aluminum, I haven't seen anything where I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of sketched out by using this here or there. Like I load this thing up very often and I've had zero issues in durability. I'm excited about the tech, right? Like I think pieces like this and things like this are the future, right? It's very low barrier for people. You know, based on what I believe in fitness, I don't think, you know, people should, you know, rely on this and this only and not a human being to coach them, obviously. But I think this helps, right? I think this is a great auxiliary piece for anyone to have in their garage, in their gym, in their living room, wherever they put this thing, and still use it to be coached. So I'm excited about the technology. I'm excited about the sensors and the over-air software updates that they can push to this thing, because the Tonal is the Tonal right now in this version 1. But in 12 months from now, we can be doing another video and talking about 100 new features that are in this because it's software. So that's really exciting to me. And I mentioned it with the gym piece, but it is so low profile that you could have this in a studio apartment and it would look okay and you could use it for resistance training. And on that note, I think it's awesome that now the general public, general population can now perform resistance training in their homes in a safe way, right? So before it was, I have to go buy a bunch of dumbbells, I have to buy this adjustable kettlebell, I have to buy bands, I have to get this and that. Now it's like, no, you could just go and get this and you can hit some really tough contractions and you can hit some awesome accessory or auxiliary exercises as well, just using this thing on your wall. And because of the benefits that come along with resistance training, I think that's a good thing. No matter what your thoughts are on a cable system or anything like that, you're getting some really good contractions using this thing. So all in all, I like it. I do recommend it. Price point is a factor though, right? Like not a lot of us have, you know, $3,500 that we can just throw at this cable machine, no matter how nice it is. So think about, you know, the price point of this and what your alternative is. If price is an issue and your alternative is $250, don't get this. If price point is an issue and your alternative is $3,000, $2,500, go with this, right? Look at your experience. Are you experienced enough to buy a home gym and some rings and a pull-up bar and a barbell? Would you know what to do with those things? If you wouldn't know what to do with those things if they were in your garage or in your living room today, don't spend a bunch of money on them. I would invest in something like this because it's going to kind of walk you through that process. And then obviously I'm going to tell you to get a coach to help you move along. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful to you. I've used this thing for a couple months and I kind of jotted down some insights into what I wanted to know prior to purchasing this thing. And I hope that I answered those questions for you.